Hello. I want to start with the end and say it's been a great class. I really enjoyed the topics we covered throughout the semester. I also found the book to be very helpful and interesting. I think many of the things we covered this semester will help me out in my career, and I think I might still continue to read the book even after this class is over. Albert Einstein once said, and I quote, "Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the universe." One example of this is the show Psych. Psych is a show where the main character, which is Sean Spencer, he pretty much acts stupid almost every single episode, and he pretends to be a psychic, which the actual police buys, and they hire him as a private investigator to solve some of their cases. He is actually very effective at solving cases. He sometimes just stumbles on just random pieces of evidence, or he thinks about some weird thing that helps him out at the end. One of the topics I want to cover today is the self fulfilling prophecy theory. What this theory is to have an expectation of something and acting according to that expectation. This actually makes it more likely to happen, which I thought was pretty cool, just like a pretty cool theory. Um, One example of this would be when Juliet and Sean met for the first time. Sean had a crush on her, and he saw himself dating her in the future. Um, I have a picture of them. That would be them in the cafe that they met. Um, Sean instantly started talking to her, and he might have been a little bit weird the way he talked, but that kind of helped him out. Um, at the end of the show, they actually end up being together, and on the last episode, um, Sean proposes to Juliet. Someone watching this scene, they could be um, more likely to talk to their crush, and it might incentivize them to try and asking them out and being a little bit more extroverted. Um, Sean's way of speaking is very different, and sometimes it is kind of weird, but I think that's just part of who he is, and he can't really change that. But he definitely did get his point across, so I do believe his communication was competent. From the relationship that Sean and Juliet have, I would say that I learned that there's no correct way of communicating. You just pretty much have to know how to communicate with the right people and how to act with others. You can't just act the same with everyone around you. You have to adapt and know when to change. Personality is another topic I want to cover. Personality is our constant behavior and characteristics. Uh, One example of this would be Henry and Sean, and that would be them. Um, since Sean was a little kid, um, he had this hyper observant characteristic about him, and that was passed down from his grandfather to his father and then to him. Um, this was shown in a scene where um, Sean's grandfather and Sean were sitting in a bench, and I believe his dad was in the back. Um, and the grandfather pretty much tells him how he passed it down to his father, and his father passed it down to him. Um, I believe we all get something from our parents, and even though we do develop our own personalities, I think we get some traits from our parents. Like, for say, if they were extroverted, I think we might be a little bit more inclined to be extroverted. Um, the media representation in the scene um, leaves the viewer thinking, what are their characteristics that were passed down to them. And I believe it's something they can use to better communicate with others. For example, if they were shy, that they might be more inclined to communicate more through text or online. And I believe this definitely is an example of competent communication, just because Sean's grandfather and his father were able to successfully tell him that what he was when he was hyper observant, it was actually passed down from generation to generation. Lastly, the relationship that Sean and Henry have, um, I believe that it shows that people don't have to constantly be communicating. I believe that not talking to someone for a certain period amount of time doesn't really affect the relationship, just as long as when you actually meet the person and you actually gather around with them again, you continue speaking the way you used to. Lastly, I want to touch on the topic of prompting, which is helping a speaker disinvolve by using silence and short statements. A perfect example of this would be the relationship that Sean and Gus have. A particular scene would be the Civil War reenactment scene, which was a small moment where Sean was blurring out ideas and Gus just wanted him to keep throwing out ideas to see if one of them could make a connection and find the killer, which actually does end up happening in that particular scene. Um, Gus has been Sean's best friend since they were small kids, and I think the way that they were able to communicate, even though it was a little bit weird and they use um, just goofy ways of communicating, is very effective. Um, from watching Sean and Gus, people can correlate the idea that sharing personal information might lead to um, being more close with that person and make a bigger connection. As you can see, that is Sean and Gus, and they are very weird. Um, and yes, I do believe that Sean and Gus make a perfect team, and their communication is actually um, competent. Just because every time someone is trying to say something, they know exactly what each other means. And even though it is weird, they still are able to know what they're trying to say. So I do think it is effective. Um, and lastly, I would say that respecting each other's wants is key in a relationship and listening to one another.